that's an oppressive idea that's come down to us from evil people over the years. Actually, it doesn't really matter. It can be anything. You know, I was told a story by parents when they were waiting at the school gate and a couple brought their baby and they said, "Oh, what is it? Is it a boy or girl?" They said, "Well, it doesn't matter, does it?" I said, "All right, okay." I just thought they were asking a friendly question. It's this idea that is really growing in society that male, female is an oppressive set of terminology to oppress you and stop you from being who you are. Whereas we know from the scriptures, and it is rooted in scripture, it's that God created us male and female. And if you really don't like the Bible, well, at least go to biology. It's really clear from chromosomes there is male and female, and this is where you can counter this argument not only from scriptures but also from science and biology. So queer would say, well, there isn't that. Also, queer would say, well, heterosexuality, saying that sex should be between a man and a woman, that's oppressive. That's restricting our freedoms, because we can do all sorts of things with our bodies sexually, and that's fine. That's who we are. That's how we feel. Do you understand that? So anything that's not that can be queer. So it's an embracing term that says all these other ways of being are really how we'll be free. So, and if you can track that through, you can maybe understand the whole postmodern and the Marxist stuff. And read some really intense books from the bookstore afterwards if you want to get deeper into that. Thank you for your question. Yeah, another microphone that might work.
Sorry, what was the cost of Christian school to start?
Yeah, it does cost money. Normally what happens is the teachers take lower salaries than they would get anywhere else because it's part of their vision. The parents would commit some of their finances and they look at the costs, they split it up, and it's normally between £3,000 and £6,000 a year. State schools would give on average about £6,000 a year per pupil, something like that. And normally Christian schools can work in a similar way to that. So it is a chunk of money every year, and we've done it. There was a postman who sent his 4 daughters through the King's School Whitney, and I really don't know how he did it, and actually he says to me, I don't know how I did it either. If the Lord calls you to do that, like if he calls you to home educate, he's got a way of providing for you with the sacrifices that will be required within all of that. And schools do offer bursaries, they do find ways to help support parents that really struggle with finances. If you've got a church that is supporting the school, they will often find ways to financially help, maybe offering facilities for free, for example. These things can really cut the costs. So that's the kind of order of expense that it often costs. Yeah.
Thank you. I think you do great work. Your Christian show does fantastic work. But there are organisations out there that are antithetical to what you are teaching and call themselves Christian groups as well that say your identity is who you are, so your sexual identity is who you are, even though you're a Christian. So what really matters is that you're a Christian. It doesn't matter whether you identify as gay or lesbian or trans. So what do you say to those groups?
So it's a question of, taking me as a young man, could I have said, I'm a gay Christian, I'm a bisexual Christian? I say that would not have been helpful to me in any way, shape or form. To embrace that language for myself as an identity. It's raising up the sexual element of our personality like it's the most important one, to say I am a bisexual Christian or I'm a Christian bisexual. That would be, to me, what that would be doing. I do understand what's going on as they're debating it and arguing it. Often they're trying to make a bridge between where society is and where we are. In the doing of that, though, there are huge dangers of them owning these identities and saying these identities are fine and beautiful and lovely and should be blessed in church, and you can see where that all heads. And that's not the position that we come from as an organisation, or I come from myself. I do understand why it is argued like that, because it's all part of this bridge building that is sought to be done to try and be welcome and inclusive in it all. But there are huge dangers in owning those words for yourself. See, I have to say I have bisexual temptations. I've had temptations in those directions, but to act those things out, to act out and respond to those temptations would be sin. So why would I, if your temptation here is to gamble, you're a gambling addict, would I say I'm a gambling addict Christian? I wouldn't own that as an identity of a temptation that would lead me somewhere that was damaging. If I got drug addiction as my issue, I would say I'm an alcoholic Christian. I wouldn't own that as an identity. I'd say, you know what, I'm an alcoholic if I was, and I'm working my way through that, but I wouldn't own it as an identity proudly. I would say this is part of my sanctification to be free from that. That's not who I am. And I think a part of the problem is we don't tell the end of the story of there's a new heavens and a new earth life. This isn't just about living this life, it's about who we are now, but who we're going to be in the future. I will not be bisexual in the new heavens and the new earth. I will not be an alcoholic in the new heavens and new earth. Why am I that identity now? Because I am a new creation. Am I not? Yeah, I could get preaching.
Here we have the privilege and perhaps the burden of having church schools in this country. And we've had kids go to church schools, and there's Anglican church schools and Catholic church schools. Any strategies that you would suggest, or we just write them off?
Most of my teaching experience has been in church schools as a primary school teacher. I think there are huge opportunities that can still be taken because of the history and the heritage. Sadly, a lot of them are taking on board the church's inclusive agenda, and that is coming into schools sometimes even more quickly than some of the state-run schools, because of this idea that to be loving and inclusive is a Christian idea, so therefore to be loving and inclusive in these ways that the LGBT organisations say. What's really important is that you have Christians being teachers, Christians being head teachers, Christians being governors in those schools, so they can set the agenda for those schools and the directions that they will go in. A big problem with church schools is they often don't have a Christian head teacher. Their recruitment processes don't encourage Christians into those positions because they're kind of state-funded schools with a Christian label. That's often what they've become. I have really good friends who are teachers who are not doing that at all. They're doing a fantastic job of allowing Open the Book to come in and do great assemblies, or inviting in organisations that can also do great things with children in RE and other aspects of what school life is doing. And they won't celebrate. They're not going to celebrate Pride. That's not something they're going to do, and they've got argued reasons why they won't do that. You can have that kind of influence if you're in those schools as a governor, as a head teacher, as teachers. So Christians need to get involved in those schools, and what better place could there be than what's called a church school, so have the excuse of saying, you know, this is the foundation of this, so I'm going to talk to you about Jesus. That's what I used to do regularly in the schools where I was, and there was still freedom to do that. So I wouldn't write them all off. There are certain portions of the country where there are some great Christian head teachers doing some great work in church schools, and I've got friends who are doing that kind of thing. So I see hope, but every week we've got things coming into Christian Concern from church schools where they are just embracing this ideology as well. So it's a very mixed picture.
Thank you very much. And it's an observation, also a question. There has been, from my own observation, in history, there was an outflow of missionaries from this country,
yes,
to other parts of the world, including Africa. I'm beginning to see there's now an inflow into this country from the good work that was done by the fathers or mothers of this country,
yes,
that God is bringing back.
Praise God.
And it was significant when you mentioned that an African lady is standing up, Christian Concern is fighting behind to bring the first in case law, which I believe will go through.
Yes.
And that's my comment, because I realize also that actually there is hope for this country. I know I'm here. The reason I'm here is that there is hope for this country.
Amen.
Not boasting, but boasting in the Lord. I've seen it multiplied in so many ways. And I realize, just to reassure us, that there are more, like Elijah was saying that he was the only prophet in Israel. And God had to open his eyes to say that there were thousands of prophets who were not bowing to violence, I want to reassure the United Kingdom that there are many prophets in the kingdom who are fighting, who are winning, and in the fullness of time, this country will be overwhelmed by what God has prepared, because God loves his children.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, and be a part of what God is going to do. And I believe, Christian schools, those parents who are really working out to pass Christian faith onto their children, they're raising up the leaders of a revival generation. That was what that trajectory has showed me. That's led to kind of shock. But I said there's always a remnant. Now I do think things are going to get worse, but there's going to come a point at which there's going to be an upswing. And are you going to be a part of that?
Yes. Amen.
Are you going to be a part of that?
Yeah.
Because it needs you and I to train up the next generation. For such a time as this, you've been called. Sorry, I'm getting a bit sharp. Yes, Catherine.
Okay, thank you. Just a quick one. As a parent, if you're not satisfied with the RSC curriculum of your children's school, do you have the right to withdraw them from RSC lessons?
You have a right to withdraw from sex education, and primary schools don't have to teach any sex education. It's up to the head teacher what they choose to teach. They still have a right to withdraw from sex education. But what they do is they mix it all together. So you can get LGBT stuff happening in a maths lesson, because they'll do problem solving that says, there's a gay pride march, and they start at this time and finish at that time. It gets kind of integrated into the whole of the curriculum. So what do you take them out of to get them out of it? So you have a right to be consulted about specifically the relationship sex education curriculum. You have a right to be consulted and get involved in schools' consultations and say your piece about what they give to you. We are constantly helping parents to write formal complaints, for example. That really gets the head teacher's attention. Believe me, I know, I was a head teacher. If you get a formal complaint coming in, it has to be seen, especially if it's about the head teacher and what the head teacher's allowed into the school. It has to go to governors. All sorts of processes have to happen within a certain time scale. Has to be reported to Ofsted when they have inspections, all that kind of stuff. So it's a really sharp tool to use if you need it, and we can help parents use that when necessary. Of course, if you can talk relationally and you're getting heard and listened to and you can make changes that way, do that. Pray for your schools. Pray for them. Pray for these teachers. It's not an easy job. They've got all sorts of things going on. Safeguarding issues coming out, there is. But do speak up and say what needs to be said about the sex stuff. If you don't say, is anybody else going to? So, did I answer your question? I got off on one there a bit. I did, alright, that's good. Okay, praise God. Any other questions? Are we reading through? One more? One more, okay.
Someone run back, maybe. Anyone here? Yeah.
Yeah. Actually required as part of our national curriculum. What of it is at the discretion of the school?
Really good question. Schools take it far too far. It's not all required in law, to summarise it. But because of all these organisations piling in, essentially when it was prohibited for homosexuality to be promoted to children, a section that Margaret Thatcher brought in, and homosexuals, those from these organisations were furious that that was brought in by Margaret Thatcher to refuse these things being allowed to be part of children. So when it was, Section 28 was repealed, there'd been this kind of build-up of energy and creativity, just ready to then pour out all those organisations and many more, pour their resources into schools to say to the schools, well, now this is what you should be doing. And schools who are busy people, oh, it's fine, we'll use that curriculum, fine, come in and train our teachers. And so therefore they go far beyond what the actual statutes say they should or shouldn't do. So there is actually some pretty good government guidance that we're pointing schools back to, saying, actually, no, this is what the government guidance says schools. This is what the law says schools. But unless you push back, the culture of the school gets shaped by what these organisations have done and are doing, and what activists are doing. And if you get an activist teacher, an activist head teacher, their agenda inevitably influences, because it's all being very welcome to be inclusive. groups. So you get somebody in your school, they'll be welcomed and included and will be able to shape what goes on in the school. But there is a lot of statutes and laws and government guidance that say there is no need in primary schools to teach anything about LGBT issues if the schools talk to its parents and the Christians, the Muslims, and the parents say, we don't want this kind of stuff in the school. Then the school has to pay due regard to that consultation and then it shouldn't be doing it. There you go, brief answer, there's a longer answer, but that's probably it.
Can we have a huge round of applause, please, for the